Bro got reincarnated as the 7th prince and immediately forgot about world peace. This man's only goals are becoming overpowered, collecting waifus, and bullying villains with unlimited mana. Meanwhile, every girl in the kingdom is falling for this tiny menace, while grown men who train their whole lives are getting packed up by a kid with mommy issues and main character. In the start of the story, Lloyd opens his eyes. A crowd of panicked maids is already surrounding him, and his first instinct is to throw a fireball at them before he notices his tiny baby hands and hesitates just long enough to miss, blasting a massive hole straight through the castle wall instead. A fireworks display happening outside muffles the explosion perfectly, sparing everyone from full-blown panic, while the kingdom celebrates Prince Lloyd's birth completely unaware that the newborn just remodeled the castle. The maids, however, are quietly reconsidering their careers. When Lloyd slips away while the maids are distracted, he runs directly into castle officials who promise to keep quiet and even invite him hunting, though he turns them down without much interest. Since he is only the 7th prince, they hardly push the matter, but one of them quietly notes that staying on his good side seems wise after witnessing what the baby did to the wall. They even start wondering aloud whether he might be the reincarnation of the father of sorcery, and as it turns out, they are not entirely wrong. Lloyd is simply a reincarnated sorcerer with no explanation for why he remembers his past life or how he ended up royalty, but none of that matters to him as much as getting back into magic does. His tutor Silpha has been running him through intense training for 3 years straight, and she is relentless about pushing him to improve regardless of where he falls in the line of succession. During one of their sessions, Lloyd starts copying her movements through control-type magic, then takes it further by lengthening his sword, boosting his strength, and levitating simultaneously to keep pace with her. Silpha catches him cheating but responds with genuine praise when she realizes he has been casting 2 spells at once, something that palace mages still struggle with, though Lloyd stays quiet about actually running 4. That evening, bath time becomes a whole ordeal when Silpha holds him in her lap as punishment for skipping his last bath to read instead, and while Lloyd sits there completely mortified, a maid tells him about a forbidden library deep inside the castle, where a demon named Grimoire was sealed away inside a book to protect the kingdom long ago. The second the maids get distracted, arguing over other things, Lloyd is already gone and moving through the castle like a ghost, using an airbending spell to refract light around himself as he slips past guards and reaches the forbidden library. The seal placed by 10 mages barely slows him down, and once he breaks through, he steps inside and starts browsing with full appreciation for what he has found, fully intending to reseal everything properly before leaving. A high-ranking visitor makes his way through the mansion with the kind of ease that comes with authority, and Grimoire immediately alerts Lloyd before Prince Albert, the 2nd prince and the kingdom's most celebrated genius, steps into the library. Albert has special access to the space and casually extends an open invitation for Lloyd to spend time with him whenever he likes. Since Lloyd has been stuck holding back his abilities inside the castle, he is genuinely relieved when Albert brings him out to the training range, though he has absolutely no interest in standing out or getting pulled into royal politics. Keeping things low-key, he deliberately curves his fireballs so they barely graze the targets, leaving the crowd underwhelmed while Grimoire quietly recognizes just how much precision that kind of restraint actually requires. Feeling adventurous, Lloyd attempts Grimoire's dual incantation technique and pulls it off on the first try, which sends Grimoire into a panic about recklessness, while Lloyd simply moves on, asking him to fire an infernal fireball so he can study it. He then reveals that he has been stacking 100 spells inside a single incantation line, which leaves Grimoire completely speechless since even demons struggle to manage 3. Lloyd pushes even further by discovering he can speak with 2 mouths simultaneously, and he combines an infernal fireball with a water ball to produce a burst of mana so massive that he directs it skyward just to avoid destroying everything around him. The resulting display lights up the sky for miles, and while servants back at the castle doubt his abilities, Albert defends him without hesitation and predicts he will one day become a grand sage. What nobody realizes is that Lloyd accidentally tore a hole in the atmosphere, which he quietly repairs before anyone can trace it back to him. The next morning, after the atmospheric tear makes the front page of the newspaper, Lloyd reads a story about adventurers clearing a dungeon and immediately decides he wants to try one himself. To avoid detection, he crafts a wooden copy of himself that moves and senses the environment just like the real thing, leaving Grimoire in charge of it while he slips out. When Lloyd notices Grimoire getting a little too comfortable with his temporary freedom, one sincere comment about how grateful he is to have him as a familiar is enough to bring the demon to tears and reset his priorities entirely. While searching for a dungeon, Lloyd and Grimoire come across a girl dismantling a group of attackers with sharp martial arts, and after Lloyd disguises himself as a character he calls Robert, she immediately becomes infatuated and insists on joining him. Inside the dungeon, she teaches him about channeling chi through breath control, and Lloyd masters the technique so quickly that she starts planning how to make Robert her fiancé through further training. Right up until opening a chest triggers a trap and something unexpected crawls out. Tao is genuinely terrified of the lich standing before her, but the moment Robert asks what is going on, she plays it off like nothing and shoves him out of the boss room before he can protest, sending him tumbling down the corridor while she stays behind, knowing full well she might not walk out of this fight. The lich is far too powerful for a dungeon of this level, even for someone of her caliber, and all she can do is buy Robert enough time to get clear. Robert, frustrated and without a map, tries to reach Grimoire for directions only to receive a panic message pulling him back to the castle, but before he can act on it, something pulls him back toward Tao instead. Inside, she has managed to land one devastating chi blast that breaks through the lich's barrier and sends it crashing into the wall, but the effort leaves her completely drained and barely standing while the lich recovers like it barely felt anything. Just as it moves in to finish her, Robert reappears at the entrance battered but refusing to leave, throwing up a barrier to block the incoming spell and planting himself between Tao and the monster without hesitation. He begins working on something during the fight that surprises even the lich, attempting to merge his mana with the chi technique Tao had taught him earlier that same day. Focusing entirely on his breathing the way she had shown him, he drops his barrier deliberately, grabs a stalactite from the cave ceiling, and begins releasing a series of precise chi-infused strikes that cut through the lich's defenses with a speed and accuracy that the creature cannot keep pace with. With one final concentrated strike, Robert brings the lich down and splits the cave clean through in the process. They find nothing but a worn-out dagger in the chest before the dungeon begins collapsing around them, and they escape just in time. Tao is left wondering why Robert chose chi over magic during the fight, and when he tells her it was simply an interesting experiment, she is equal parts impressed and unsettled, realizing she never got his real name or any way to find him again. Robert quietly cancels his disguise and becomes Lloyd once more as he heads back to the castle. Back home, Lloyd discovers that Silpha has been running Grimoire through sword training in his absence, convinced Lloyd had been slacking. After sorting that out, Lloyd turns his full attention to the dagger, soaks it in hot water to reveal a hidden enchantment, and begins reverse engineering mana essence from scratch using monster cores, melted silver coins, and oil he wins off Silpha in their next sparring session. After significant trial and refinement, he successfully enchants 50 out of 120 weapons, a success rate that leaves Albert visibly stunned and eager to take the enchanted blades out on a monster hunt immediately. Lloyd, Albert, and Grimoire arrive at the forest for the monster hunt with the target resting calmly near a lake, and while Albert wastes no time teasing Silpha about hovering close to Lloyd, she shuts it down with a single look before a sudden ring of kobolds closes in around the group. The soldiers treat it like a warm-up, and Lloyd plays the nervous rookie perfectly, though Grimoire knows he already sensed them coming through Tao's spectral detection technique. The enchanted swords perform exactly as intended, cutting through the monsters so cleanly that Albert calls Lloyd a prodigy on the spot, only for Lloyd to casually mention that Silpha's sword was never enchanted to begin with. Tao appears out of nowhere and drops a kobold rushing at Lloyd, and he nearly blows his cover by almost calling her by the wrong name before catching himself. Tao notices the resemblance between Lloyd and Robert immediately, and when Albert steps in to smooth over the tension between her and Silpha, he ends up inviting her along for the evening. The two women argue so intensely inside Lloyd's tent that he slips out unnoticed while Albert jokes about him being a magnet for trouble. That night, Tao confirms the monster they are dealing with is a beowulf, and the moment it attacks, its speed alone makes clear this is a different class of threat entirely. Albert steps forward and delivers one massive enchanted sword strike that obliterates the beowulf cleanly, crediting Lloyd for the weapon, while Lloyd is already thinking about what additional enchantments he could have layered on. The celebration is short-lived because the beowulf stirs back to life and more monsters pour in alongside a voice dripping with fury belonging to Pazuzu, a demon using the beowulf as a vessel and feeding the surrounding monsters with his mana to keep them regenerating endlessly. While the others fight to hold the line, Lloyd uses the chaos as a classroom and asks Grimoire to teach him mana manipulation on the spot, completely unbothered by the battle raging around him. Pazuzu turns his taunts towards Silpha, mocking her for protecting someone he calls useless, and that is precisely the wrong thing to say. She steps forward with full focus, dismembers the beowulf with her family's dual blade technique, then follows it with a move called Diving Sparrow that takes its head clean off, exposing Pazuzu directly and leaving everyone around her completely silent. Lloyd watches the whole thing unfold and sees his tutor in an entirely different light, quietly shaping his mana to mirror what he just witnessed while Grimoire stands equally stunned beside him. And Silpha stands over the wreckage, looking completely unbothered. Silpha moves in to finish Pazuzu off, but he surprises her with moves she was not expecting. And before anyone can recover, he releases a suffocating miasma that drops the entire group at once, including Silpha, who hits the river after taking a direct attack. Albert tries to push through but loses strength quickly, and even Tao, who holds out longer than anyone, eventually gets swallowed by one of the puppet monsters after overexerting herself trying to hold the line. Pazuzu, convinced he has won, turns his attention to Silpha and begins moving in with the miasma, confident her strength makes her worth the effort. Lloyd steps through the miasma completely unaffected, which stops Pazuzu cold, and the shock doubles when he realizes that Grimoire is a demon as well. Pazuzu sends his controlled monsters forward, but Lloyd uses the moment to test his newly learned mana manipulation, stripping Pazuzu's control away from the Bearwolves entirely and freeing Tao in the process. The Bearwolves, remembering their own instincts and pride, turn on Pazuzu immediately, and their coordinated pack attack is something his puppet monsters cannot replicate at all. Pazuzu punishes them furiously and declares that he is about to show his real power now that he is no longer splitting his mana between the minions. Lloyd barely registers the threat because he is too busy wondering why magic cannot eliminate demons entirely, and the answer only makes him more eager to experiment. Pazuzu senses the dark power building around Lloyd and begins to panic, and Grimoire tells him plainly that his mana will never be enough to touch Lloyd regardless of how much he pushes. What follows is less of a fight and more of a live testing session, with Lloyd running through spells at a rate of 240 per minute while Pazuzu scrambles to dodge barriers closing in from every direction, eventually begging for mercy before Lloyd wraps up his 30-minute experiment and checks whether the demon is still functional. When everyone starts coming around, Lloyd moves quickly and tells them that a man named Robert appeared and handled the demon while they were unconscious, giving himself a clean exit from any difficult questions. The town celebrates Albert's return, the king praises the group inside the palace, and Albert openly credits Lloyd as the one who contributed the most during the entire hunt. He goes further and suggests Lloyd should enter the royal succession, which stuns everyone in the room. But Lloyd turns it down without any drama and walks outside where a bearwolf cub has followed them home. He names it Shiro, starts thinking about mana-based monster taming, and moves on, completely unbothered, while Albert quietly tells the king that the throne was always going to be too small for someone like Lloyd anyway. Lloyd has been struggling to get Shiro to follow complex commands, and after a spell meant to help ends up confusing the wolf instead, he and Grimoire head to Princess Alice for guidance. Alice is Lloyd's older sister and the sixth princess of Saloum, a girl so devoted to animals that even the dangerous ones roam freely in her garden, while Grimoire watches in quiet horror. She greets Lloyd with so much enthusiasm that he actually passes out, and her maid Eris scolds her while Alice pays absolutely no attention. When Lloyd spots a lesser-class Fenrir among her animals that had completely slipped past his detection, he realizes Alice has been masking its presence through a concealment trick hidden in her headband, and he immediately asks her to teach him how to connect with Shiro properly. Alice demonstrates her approach, and animals pour in from every corner of the tower to surround her, and she explains that the secret is not commands at all, but rather sharing your will directly through mana, so the animal understands your intent on a subconscious level. Lloyd watches the flow of mana carefully, tries it himself, and Shiro responds immediately without hesitation, leaving everyone stunned and Alice beaming with pride while Silpha stands quietly disappointed that the answer turned out to be a mental connection rather than something warmer. Before Lloyd can enjoy the moment, Albert arrives and pulls him away to meet Prince Dian, the fourth prince who studied smithing and has been dreaming of creating spellbound swords accessible to everyone. Lloyd enchants one of Albert's swords in front of Dian, who is initially doubtful but ends up completely floored by the result, and the two agree to collaborate on forging a sword capable of releasing fire when swung. The first attempt shatters the steel, and after Lloyd investigates, he discovers that Dian's mana essence contains barely any hematite, making it unsuitable for the work, so the group heads to the Adventurers Guild to register for a dungeon run to gather better materials. At the guild, Lloyd suppresses his mana heavily and receives an E-combat rank with an A magic rating, which irritates the adventurers present who feel the comparison cheapens a legendary standard. Things move along when Tao walks in, now A-ranked after spending weeks clearing dungeons searching for Robert, and she agrees to help the group in exchange for a date with Albert. Inside the dungeon, they gather what they need, and back at the forge, Dian and Lloyd produce a sword so overwhelmingly powerful that Lloyd quietly admits he pushed the enchantments too far. They name it D-Lord. That night, Lloyd notices a strange tear in the space above the garden that even Shiro has not reacted to, and he stands there alone trying to make sense of what it could possibly be. Lloyd spots a mysterious figure outside and rushes to the courtyard, throwing up a barrier the moment she tries to flee and trapping her before she can disappear. She drops her disguise, apologizes, and then warns him about her special move before Lloyd's head goes foggy and the scent of flowers fills his senses. He identifies it as poison from a blighted individual and attempts a purification spell, but she tells him it will not work on her kind before vanishing entirely. The girl is Ren, the poison moth, and she leaves him with a warning that the effects will last 3 days. Lloyd uses a healing breath technique to manage the symptoms and stays on his feet, then calmly tracks her movement through the city by reading Tears in Space rather than chasing her directly. He follows her trail straight to the Assassin's Guild hideout, where Ren is mid-report when the group realizes they are being watched. Lloyd steps forward and the assassins immediately understand that letting the 7th Prince walk away after seeing their base is not an option. Rather than defending himself, Lloyd drops his barrier on purpose, genuinely curious about the unique mana traits each guild member carries and wanting to experience their abilities firsthand. Babylon, the Warp Blighted, opens with rapid kicks that Lloyd handles using Tao's defensive techniques without much effort. Crow's Curse hits harder and briefly sends Lloyd to the ground, and Galilea's sticky ability traps him completely until Lloyd sheds his outer clothes mid-air to break free and lands in nothing but his underwear, which the 4th assassin Talia finds more amusing than threatening before she stabs herself in the leg and transfers the pain directly to Lloyd. The sensation excites him more than it slows him down, and he forms 2 swords from the cloth around him and takes on Silpha's fighting stance, which sends visible panic through the group the moment they recognize it. The brawl escalates into chaos when Lloyd maneuvers Crow's Curse into hitting Galilea, and a series of collisions leaves Talia accidentally exposed and Lloyd still pressing forward despite absorbing every bit of damage she feels, simply healing through it and continuing. When the dust settles, Lloyd offers each of them something unexpected, engraving a spell directly onto Galilea that regulates his mana and stabilizes his blight, then offering to do the same for the rest of the group. The hostility drains out of the room immediately, and Galilea opens up about their leader Jade, a teleporter who vanished after an accident and has not been seen since. Before the conversation goes much further, a teleportation ring appears and a black envelope materializes on the wall. Silpha tracks Lloyd's scent to the hideout and finds only his clothes and a letter stating he has left with the guild toward Lordost, a kingdom on the edge of war with Saloum, and Albert immediately begins preparing for the worst. The symbol on the letter belongs to Jade, and once the guild recognizes it, the mood shifts entirely. The letter is an apology for his long absence, along with news that he has overthrown the Lord of Lordos, who had been quietly building toward war, and that he is now the new lord and wants to celebrate with everyone. Lloyd agrees to make the trip, partly because the letter itself appeared out of nowhere through what seems to be controlled teleportation magic, something that does not yet exist in their world, and his curiosity about how it works is reason enough to go. During the journey, Babylon pulls Lloyd aside and fills him in on Ren's background while she is away getting food. She had accidentally poisoned her own parents as a child and survived alone until Jade found her, took her in despite the obvious risk, and gave her a family in the guild. Galilea taught her, Crow and Talia made her clothes, and Jade eventually helped neutralize her poison. By the time Ren comes back and serves the meal she hunted and cooked herself, nobody is eager to try it. But Lloyd eats without hesitation and the rest follow. And while it looks rough, it is genuinely decent for someone with almost no practice. Galilea then shares a memory of Jade gathering the guild to reveal he was actually the 3rd Prince of Lordost, a family that had been orchestrating wars, and that he had been using the guild to work toward his own goals the entire time. He expected anger, but the guild had already suspected he was royalty from the way he carried himself, and their response was simple. His reasons did not change the fact that he was family. Jade refused their offer to help him take down the Lordos family, not wanting to put them at risk or compromise the possibility of clearing their bounties, and instead asked them to promise to keep the guild alive whether he returned or not. If he did not come back, it would mean he had become the new ruler and was building a place where the Blighted could live freely. They reach Lordos to find a celebration exactly as the letter described, and with no hostility in the air, Grimoire prepares to head back to the sleeping Lloyd, but something goes wrong the moment Jade walks in. He pins the guests with cursed speech and announces they will be used as vessels for blighted demons, and Grimoire barely buys the guild enough time to react before getting launched across the grounds by a force calling itself Guisarm, the demon who spent months breaking Jade's mind until Jade ended his own life to protect his friends, at which point Guisarmi healed him just in time and took full control. Lloyd wakes up, hears everything, and arrives at the castle surrounding the guild members and barriers before unleashing a strike that obliterates everything in range. The moment Lloyd's power hits the air, the demons lose their composure entirely, but before dealing with them, he moves straight to the guild to check on everyone, patches up Ren's injury, and tells them Grimoire has filled him in on everything. He wants them gone before the demons regroup, and while Ren pushes back, Galilea stops her and acknowledges that staying would only make things harder for Lloyd. Guizarm teleports back just in time, orders the demons to pursue the fleeing guild, and Lloyd answers by hitting everything in range with death lasers, wiping out the group except for Guizarm, who slips out through teleportation before the blast connects. Guizarme attempts a death curse that slips straight through Lloyd's barrier, and Grimoire physically forces Lloyd to dodge it before he can do something reckless out of curiosity. The curse kills one of the nearby demons instantly, and Lloyd's analysis magic confirms it destroyed the demon inside while leaving the body with what looked like a natural heart attack. Grimoire explains the real threat. Guizarme's attacks draw directly from his mana, which means barriers are useless against them. And unlike Pazuzu, this is not a fight Lloyd can simply overpower his way through. Guizarm is not a ranked demon but a demon lord, a tier so far above anything they have faced that even Grimoire, a third-class demon, is urging retreat with genuine fear. Lloyd flies closer anyway and introduces himself. The two exchange words briefly before Guizarme opens the fight with a mana spike that nearly breaks through Lloyd's barrier, the first time Grimoire has ever seen it take real damage. The exchange escalates fast, with Guizarme using teleportation to shatter the barrier entirely and send Lloyd into a wall of conjured swords, forcing Lloyd to improvise with an earth puppet shield while Grimoire watches in barely contained panic. Lloyd switches tactics and creates a decoy of himself reduced to dust, letting Guizarme believe he has landed a finishing blow before striking from behind with an enchanted sword, forcing Guizarme to teleport out of range at the last second. While Lloyd keeps Guizarme occupied, the guild battles the demons, pursuing them across the bridge with everything they have. Galilea traps them with webs, Crow drops several with cursed speech, and Babylon gets the gate open. But when the demons break through, Talia steps forward and tells the others to run while she holds the line alone. Galilea refuses to let her face it without him and locks the gate behind them both. Just as Talia moves to sacrifice herself, fireballs come raining through from the other side of the gate, the iron splits open, and Albert walks through leading the rest of Lloyd's family, all of them arriving with one purpose. With the demons scorched and help finally on the ground, Ren exhales for the first time in what feels like hours, but the relief is short-lived when Albert and Silpha turn their attention directly to the guild. Silpha pulls out a pocket watch and gives them 1 minute per question, making it clear that lies will cost someone their life. Gallia admits Lloyd is at the castle fighting the demon responsible for everything, and the guild scrambles to keep his true strength secret, while Silpha reads straight through their nervous answers. Albert diffuses the tension before it turns fatal, but the mood shifts again when he holds up Lloyd's underwear and asks for an explanation. Galilea's attempt to clarify only makes it worse. Before things spiral further, Ren steps forward and asks them plainly to trust her just once, explaining that Lloyd chose to fight for them when he had no obligation to. Princess Alias arrives on Liru, who immediately sniffs Ren and leaves her alone, which is all the confirmation Albert needs to shift focus entirely to the demons. Guizarme destroys the bridge at Lloyd's request to clear space for their fight, and dark spears begin raining down while both sides scramble to regroup. On the ground, Albert's knights discover the possessed bodies regenerate from every wound and are draining their enchanted swords fast, and Albert hesitates to go all out knowing there are still human bodies involved. Babylon appears without warning and snaps a demon's neck clean around, explaining to Albert that the possessed were already beyond saving, and Albert makes the call to stop holding back and orders his knights to finish it. Silpha does not wait for the order. She is already on Shiro, crossing toward the broken bridge when a demon intercepts her. And what follows is an exchange with an 8th-class demon called Humpty, who fights using a stolen blade technique and wants Silpha's body to add her skills to his collection. He lands a hit that slices through her dress, praises the previous master whose technique he absorbed, and declares that demons simply wear humans like clothing. Silpha answers by replicating his own move back at him after watching it once, which enrages him completely, and then she calls Shiro to her side and draws the sword Lloyd and Diane forged specifically for her. Lloyd had noticed she always pulled her swings slightly, afraid her blade would break under full power, so he built one that simply would not. Silpha had named it Demon Bane the day she received it, a personal vow tied to her loss against Pazuzu. When Humpty reveals that Guizarme deliberately spread war rumors to lure Jade back to his death, Ren charges forward in fury and Silpha holds her back, promising to handle it herself before drawing Demon Bane and cutting Humpty into pieces in a single stroke. After cutting Humpty down, Silpha kneels beside him quietly and reflects that before the possession he must have been a remarkable warrior, someone she genuinely would have wanted to face in a real fight. The assassins pay their respects alongside her, and when Silpha notices Ren crying, she asks if they knew each other, and Ren shakes her head but admits she simply feels sorry for him. Silpha stands, straightens herself out, and tells the group plainly that they are not cut out for the life of assassins. Galilea and Crow exchange a look and finally recognize her as the legendary adventurer they had crossed paths with years ago. And before anyone can respond, a massive explosion erupts behind them. The river evaporates entirely into thick steam. And Ren immediately knows Lloyd is somewhere inside all of it. Minutes earlier, Lloyd had been airborne and under serious pressure as Guisarm launched dark energy spear discs at him continuously. The heavy barriers were holding until a magic ribbon from one of the spears unraveled and began seeping inside his defense as cursed speech, forcing Lloyd to drop his strongest barrier entirely since it could not stop something working from within. With Gizarmi possessing infinite mana, a drawn-out fight heavily favored the demon, so Lloyd switched to offense and summoned a flame golem that crashed into the river and blanketed the entire battlefield in steam. Unable to see visually, Lloyd switched to chi-based sensing and detected Guisarme holding position nearby, realizing the demon needed a clear line of sight to use his teleportation and used that window to close in fast while deploying earth magic clones to obscure his real position. Guisarm allowed himself to take a deliberate hit just to identify the real Lloyd, stabbed what he struck, and felt confident he had solved it until he realized the body he attacked was another clone and the real sword had been with a different one the entire time. Lloyd had been concealed among his own clones all along, and after landing a direct flame strike from Guisarm's blind spot, he moved in carrying Spell Taker, a blade built to absorb and decode magic, sliced through a teleportation circle, and the sword broke it down completely, giving Lloyd the understanding he needed. He canceled his invisibility, told Guisarm calmly that he understood everything now, and answered the demon's confidence with a single chi-charged punch that used no mana whatsoever, then proceeded to drive him through walls and toward the magma below with a relentless barrage until Guisarme gathered everything he had left into one condensed black ball and declared that nothing could stop what was coming. Guisarm launches his ultimate attack and watches in disbelief as Lloyd raises one hand and makes it disappear without any visible effort. Lloyd explains casually that he nullified it using the same technique, and when Guisarme demands to know how an ordinary person could possibly pull that off, Lloyd tells him that a few years back he studied it through countless magic texts and tested it by blowing up mountains, eventually discovering that two copies of the spell running simultaneously would simply cancel each other out on collision. Guisarme rants about the disrespect of a mortal speaking to him that way, and Lloyd responds by sneezing, then summons several void spells that close in from every direction while tracking every teleportation attempt Guisarm makes until the demon runs out of room entirely. Below in the fog, Silpha and the others notice the demon's weakening, which Ren attributes to Silpha's poison spreading through them. Albert looks up and finds the sky still dark despite it being morning, and the darkness is coming from Lloyd's mana pulling Guisarm steadily into the void. Guisarme attempts one final move by abandoning his body and pretending to be Jade, but Lloyd sees through it immediately and finishes him off. The moment Guisarm dies, Lloyd pulls his mana back and sunlight breaks through across the entire area. Afterward, Lloyd and Grimoire build a memorial for Jade, and Lloyd explains that the point is remembering him rather than marking a burial. Grimoire acknowledges the void spell but notes it moves slowly, and Lloyd explains that he had analyzed Guisarm's teleportation throughout the fight to stay one step ahead, though one real mistake would have ended things entirely. The deeper truth is that Jade had already set up the perfect teleportation spell in advance, knowing someone would eventually come to stop Guisarm, which means Jade was the real reason the fight was winnable at all. Albert arrives already knowing the grave belongs to Jade, and the guild confesses everything to him while asking Lloyd to take responsibility for them going forward. Lloyd agrees without hesitation, and Albert reminds him that accepting them means carrying everything they have done, then tells him quietly that above everything else he is still his little brother. The guild is released into Lloyd's care. Ren joins Silpha as his maid after learning her poison can be controlled and developed into proper pharmaceutical skill, and Albert handles the official account of what happened in Lordos so Lloyd can return to his magic without complications.